tearing, Korea. We do a lot of tearing every day. We tear up envelopes when we open them, and we tear up wrappers when we open those, and we separate all kinds of, I don't know what, we open everyone here is British? No, we have Americans also. So we use diapers, right? Nappies. And then you have to separate them when you want to open them up, right? And so on and so forth, meaning that there's a lot of acts of tearing that we're involved with on a kind of day-to-day level. And the question is, how do we relate to all of these activities in terms of Shabbos and in terms of Meleches Korea? Okay, because Korea is tearing, and therefore we would think that all of these things are problematic because you're tearing all things up. I don't know, stickers of different varieties, separating papers in books that have got stuck together, tearing up cotton wool, tearing bits of cotton wool up, Velcro, maybe we could speak about. Is that Korea? We've got so many instances of Korea that it's just very worth bringing it up. And of course, last week, we spoke about toilet paper, and toilet paper is also tearing. So there's so many instances of tearing. It's worth dedicating a bit of time to understanding the fundamentals of Korea. Now, if we'd be doing things more systematically, then we would do Meleches Pfeffer, meaning sewing, before we do Meleches Korea. However, because we're not doing things systematically, so it's not a big deal. And we can speak about Korea even before we speak about Pfeffer, because they are actually independent malachos. They're not connected one to the other. They're independent malachos. So I'm going to do a screen share. I didn't prepare a fancy note today. It's not because I was lazy, but it's because I was a bit lazy, if that makes any sense. But the real reason is, if you really want, because everything about Korea is in the Beiur Halachah. This is a big Beiur Halachah malacha, meaning the Mishnah Berura, he picks and chooses what to speak about. Korea, he made a firm decision that this is one of those things he's going to go on about, and he really does. And therefore, I'm actually just going to do kind of a share screen with Beiur Halachah. I see that Avi's got his own, so good for you, Avi. I'm going to do a share screen with my computer, Beiur Halachah, and then we'll just take it from there. So, hold on. Do I have permission to share a screen? Let's check. Yeah, no, I don't. You've disabled me. Either enable my permission to share a screen or make me the host, please. Avi, I need control.
You have control.
I have control. Good. All right, so here we go. Okay. Do you? That's not going to be very effective. Do you see? This is. Oh, here we are. This is Shulchan Oruch. This is Shin Mem Yud Gimel. We're actually going to start from Shin Mem Yud Daled. All right. So like this. As we know, Meleches Korea. This is in Shabbos in Perek Klal Gadol Daf Ein Beis Amud Aleph. We find that HaKorea is one of the malachos, and the kriya is dafka a kriya al manat litfol. That's what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says that Korea is only chayev when you're doing it in order to sew something back. And the Gemara says in Daf Ein Daled that we learned this out from the Yeriyos in the Mishkan. The walls of the Mishkan were made from embroidered material, and this embroidered material, sometimes there would be some kind of a flaw, because let's say some worm or other creature had eaten through some of the material, and it would have to be separated in order to put it back together again. And therefore, that's how we learn out the Malacha from the Mishkan. And the Shulchan Oruch doesn't give us any very specific Beiur Halachah. There's no siman that speaks about Beiur. However, in siman Shin Mem, which is the siman that speaks about Pfeffer, so we also find halachas of Beiur. And this one is a direct quote of the Rambam. And the Rambam says as follows, all right? You have it on your screen. Do you see my screen? Yes. Okay, yes. Good. Sorry, you don't want to see that. You want to see this. So sorry, I don't see my own screen. That's a problem. Okay. So Hamadabek Niyaros, all right? Someone who sticks together papers, Bekoilan shall Sofrim, use some glue. Harizet told us Tofer. Meaning, says the Rambam, if you stick together something with glue, that's equivalent to sewing, right? What is sewing? Sewing is putting together two bits of material. And if you stick together two pieces of paper with strong glue, which is a permanent type of connection, which is similar to sewing, then that's called tofer, that's called sewing. The same thing is true if someone separates papers when they're stuck together, and he did not intend merely for the kilkel. He didn't want to just destroy it. He didn't want just to wreck it, to destroy it. Then harazet toledes korea v'chayav. That's called korea, that's called tearing, and then you're chayav. And the big question, and this is a question that's going to be accompanying us for many cases, many instances of korea, is why you chayav in this case. The Rambam seems to imply that even though you don't have intention to sew anything back together, we mentioned the Mishnah, right? The Mishnah says, korea al menat litfol, if you tear with the intention of re-sewing, then you're chayav. But this Rambam seems to imply that it's not just tearing with the intention of sewing again, but any tearing when your intention is for a tikkun, when your intention is to do something constructive and not just something destructive, then you're going to be chayav. And the Beiur Halachah, as I mentioned, goes to town over here. So first of all, the Mishnah Berura. Mishnah Berura is over here, Mem Gimel. Okay. This is that you don't have intention of destruction bilvad only. Says the Mishnah Berura, Ela bishvil ezer to'elet, for some positive purpose. Ezer to'elet. You did not have intention of re-sewing them, right? Sometimes you separate the sticker in order to stick it back together even stronger. That's not the case, says the Mishnah Berura. In this case, you're separating it not to stick it together, but for some constructive purpose. Mikol makom chayav mishum korea. Delo be'ina bekorea dafka amanas litfo. Says the Mishnah Berura, you don't need that the tearing should be specifically for re-sewing. Ela bishvil eze tikkun kadei shelo yeh mekalkel. It's for any kind of a constructive purpose. That's it. Ve'mechaven mekalkel bilvad potter ve'oser lechatchila kochel mekalkel in the Shabbos. If you do want to just destroy it, says the Mishnah Berura, that's potter, but it's still forbidden. And that we're going to speak about later when we speak about tearing apart wrappers, right? You're tearing the wrapper. That seems to be korea, which is mekalkel, but why is that mutter? The Mishnah Berura seems to tell us that even though you're doing something destructive, nonetheless it's going to be osur, even though it's potter aval osur. All right. So yeah. Now the Beiur Halachah. Beiur Halachah. Beiur Halachah is long, so we're not going to read the whole Beiur Halachah. However, the question of the Beiur Halachah, the question that the Beiur Halachah raises, is the question that I mentioned before. Is any kind of a tikkun enough, or do you need specifically a tikkun of almanat litfar? And the Beiur Halachah over here, he mentions the nishmas adam. The nishmas adam, find it, hold on. Yeah. So the nishmas adam, he says the following. You see it here? Do you guys see when I highlight something? Is this visible to you? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the nishmas adam says that let's say as follows. Let's just read it inside. This halacha of someone that separates papers. And for any case of tearing, which is for a constructive purpose, it's only if we say that a malacha that you don't need for itself, a malacha she'ein tzrich legufa, is chayav. Aval im nisbar de potter, then you need kareya almanas litfar mamash, and that's a tikkun in itself, in the gufo itself. A malacha almanas malacha she'tzricha legufa, meaning you have to tear it only with the intention of sewing it back together. And therefore, the nishmas adam asks on the Shulchan Oruch, how can he bring this Rambam? Surely the Shulchan Oruch holds that malacha she'ein tzricha legufa is potter. That's how the nishmas adam asks on the Shulchan Oruch. And the Beiur Halachah, at great length, he argues. He says, no, Korea is considered malacha she'tzricha legufa, even when you're not doing it in order to sew, but only for any kind of a tikkun. If you're doing it for any kind of tikkun, that's enough for it to be considered malacha tzricha legufa, and therefore you're chayav. And he brings a number of proofs. As you see, it's pretty long. By the way, one of the interesting proofs is a famous Gemara that you'll probably remember. The Gemara in Shabbos speaks about someone who tears things out of anger. You know, each person when he's angry does something else. Some people stamp their feet, some people jump up and down, some people hurl things around the room. I remember someone hurled something at me once in great wrath, and I ducked, and it went right through the window and smashed the window. This was my memory of people hurling things around. It was a lemon, actually. Someone threw a lemon at me very, very strongly, and I ducked, and it just smashed the window behind me. The Baal Habayis was not impressed. It was.
Grew up in Brixton, huh?
This is Brixton, South London. Yeah, absolutely. This wasn't. He didn't throw a brick at me. It was a lemon, but it was just. So the Gemara says that somebody who tears something in his wrath is chayav for kareah. Would you believe? Even though you're clearly not tearing it in order to sew it back up again. You're tearing it in order to destroy it. But because there's a tikkun, because there's something which you're fixing up, meaning you're fixing up your anger, you're doing it for a constructive purpose of calming you down. Therefore, we find that even tearing for calming yourself down and relieving your anger, you're actually chayev. Okay, so that's one of the proofs that the Mishnah Berura brings for this position, and he mentions that Rabbi Kiva Eger brings it.
What's the penalty? What's the penalty for tearing on Shabbat? It's not death penalty, right?
Well, it's the same as any malacha, meaning you have to, if you do it inadvertently, you have to bring a korban. And nowadays, there's no korbanos.
So tearing in front of two witnesses on Shabbat is just a korban? No,
tearing inadvertently is a korban. Tearing in front of two witnesses who give you full warning and make sure you're aware of what you're doing and you're aware of the consequences is a full penalty. It's like driving. It's the same as driving on Shabbat.
Right, okay.
Yeah, don't do it. All right, so that's the Beiur Halachah. That's this Beiur Halachah. All right. However, get this. So far, we've spoken about one chiddush of the Rambam, that even if you're doing it without intention of sowing, but for a constructive purpose, that's enough to be chayev. However, says the Shulchan Oruch Harav, the Beiur Halachah, are any of you Chabad affiliated? Anyone here Chabad affiliated? Avi, are you a closet Chabadnik?
I was about to say David was.
I have 770 in my number, so I am.
There you go. I said David, could have been either David, to be honest. So it was a good guess either way.
All right.
And of course,
so anyway,
it is. Because there's this Pinchas David Mendel, it's close. It's got Mendel in there.
There is a Mendel there.
Yeah.
I have a lot of Chabad stuff hidden in my my wife's name is Bina. It's very
second name is Mendel.
Yeah, they're very
You are, so you're Chabad basically, and that's why you like late starts of Shabbos as well, no?
That's hence the beard.
All right, close parentheses. We're closing the parentheses, and the Shulchan Oruch Harav, he says the following chiddush. And in order to see this, I'm going to open up the Beiur Halachah in the previous Seif Yud Gimel. All right, does this work? Yeah, Seif Yud Gimel. You see, over here, there's a fascinating Shulchan Oruch. Okay, look at this Shulchan Oruch. Shulchan Oruch says, "Ein shevim acheres ve'ein korim haniyar." You mustn't tear papers. Says the Shulchan Oruch, why mustn't you tear papers? We would say, well, because it's korea, because it's tearing. But the Shulchan Oruch, and this is again straight out of the Rambam, the Shulchan Oruch says, why mustn't you tear papers? Mipnei shehu k'metaken kli, because you are creating, forming, fixing a vessel, a utensil. Come on. Right? That's what we would say. Don't tear because you are being korea. And clearly you're doing this for a constructive purpose because you're being metaken kli. So this is constructive. If the Rambam told us, like we saw in Seif Yud Dalet, that any constructive purpose is enough to be chayav on korea, then why does Seif Yud Gimel say that you have a problem of k'metaken kli? And k'metaken kli, by the way, means midrabanan. It's not midaraisa, right? K'metaken kli. It's a bit like tikkun kli. We had the source for this last week in the sheets, but it's from Gemara in Maseches Beitza, Daf Lamed Beis. But it's only rabbinic. It's only midrabanan. It's a rabbinic prohibition. Stuff the rabbinic prohibition. Pardon my language. This should be a daraisa prohibition of korea because you're doing it for a positive reason. So this question is asked by the Shulchan Oruch Harav, and he gives the following answer. He says that you're only chayav on tearing if you're separating two stuck together pieces of paper, pieces of material that have been sewn together, and now you're separating them, then you're chayav. But if you're not separating two things that are stuck together, but rather you're just tearing one block of paper or one sheet of material or whatever you have, then that's not korea. Korea is only separating and it's not tearing. So far, so good? So far, so good. However, the Beiur Halachah does not like this at all. And the Beiur Halachah is over here. Again, it's awfully long. The Beiur Halachah goes to town on Korea. Yeah. So he says over here, he says, look at how he says it. That you've got to admire the Mishnah Berura. When he goes to town against someone, he doesn't like mentioning them by name. He wants to give respect to his, not sure how to call them, to his adversaries in this case, but he wants to give them respect, right? One of the famous places where he does this is when he speaks about wearing a watch on Shabbos, right? Are you allowed to wear a watch on Shabbat in a place that there's no Eruv? And there was one of the Gedolei HaPoskim who said you're not only allowed to wear a watch, you're even allowed to have a clock in your pocket, one of these pocket watches. You know what I mean? The gold chain stuff. Hasidim still do it. I don't know if you've seen this, but Hasidim still do it. They have these little pockets in their waistcoats, and inside their little pockets, they put these golden like little clocks with a chain. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure we've all
never
seen
seen it done by Hasidim specifically. It sounds like a very old-timey thing.
It is, but Hasidim like to preserve the customs of our ancestors, and therefore they like these watches. And there was one of the poskim that said it's mutter to have one of those on Shabbos, and the Mishnah Berura goes to town against him, but he doesn't mention him by name. He doesn't want to say. It was a Sholem Eshiv, and the Mishnah Berura doesn't mention him by name. And also here, look at this. Got it? Umashe Ratza Echad min ha'acharonim. All right, who is this? Shulchan Oruch Harav. All right, the Balatanya. Masha Ratza Echad min ha'acharonim. Lahoiti mizet loshech kriya kim b'davah hanitfal. There's only kriya in something which is sewn together. Not something which is one body. If it's one body of material, then there's no problem of kriya, says the Shulchan Oruch Harav, right? Or as the Mishnah Berura refers to him as echad min acharonim. Says the Mishnah Berura, no way. He says, Zeh Eloi, says it's not true. Why is it not true? Because he brings a proof. He's not happy with it. Says it's not true. And in a minute, we'll go back to what the Mishnah Berura says, because he's got an interesting chiddush here also. We'll go back to this in a minute. But because he believes it's not true, that's why he says over here, Ve'im korea niyar, if you tear paper, lekraim, kedei lekaneach esas, right, in order to clean yourself after using the toilet, or for any other reason, chaya mishum korea. So says the Mishnah Berura, if you tear a paper into pieces in order to use it for some constructive purpose, says the Mishnah Berura, you're chayav, all right, which is very strong. Those who permit using toilet paper on Shabbos, and there are some who permitted it, the vast majority of poskim don't allow it for different reasons, for a number of reasons. But those who permit it have to argue with this Mishnah Berura, obviously, right? They'll go like the Shulchan Oruch Harav, that tearing one body of paper, right? Take a sheet of paper, right? Sheet of paper, and I tear a sheet of paper, right? Tear a sheet of paper, tearing the paper according to the Shulchan Oruch Harav, that's not korea, because it's not separating two things that are together. So it's not korea. It doesn't have anything to do with korea, right? It's not even a rabbinic korea. It's a nothing. You're not tearing. You're tearing, according to the Shulchan Oruch Harav, means undoing stitches. If you're not undoing stitches, if you're not separating things that are stuck together, that's not called tearing. The Mishnah Berura argues. However, it's important to realize we have a Shulchan Oruch Harav, and the Shulchan Oruch Harav is not coming out of nowhere. He's coming to explain why does this Shulchan Aruch say that, well, there's a problem of kimetakin kli, this rabbinic problem. What about tearing? So the Shulchan Oruch Harav has an excellent answer. Well, what's the Mishnah Berura going to answer? So the Mishnah Berura is bothered by this, obviously, and his answer is, I'm not going to read it inside. Avi, you'll make this up in your spare time. It's this is like probably a whole amud of your Mishnah Berura, Avi. No.
What did you say? Sorry.
I say it's probably a whole page on your Mishnah Berura.
It's a few pages.
These are long Beiur Halachah. So you can bring your Mishnah Berura to shul, Avi, and you can spend your spare time in shul reading this Beiur Halachah. We might, there's bar mitzvah Mitzvah tomorrow on Shabbos. So always on bar mitzvahs, you should have something to do there. It sometimes takes a long time, all the singing and stuff. So in any case, so I wouldn't read it inside now, but the Mishnah Berura has the following chiddush. He says, you know what? Listen to this, guys. Get this chiddush. He says, Korea is only chayev when there's a tikkun for both sides of what you're tearing. If there's a tikkun only for one side of what you're tearing, that's not good enough. And therefore, in this case of the toilet paper, the Mishnah Berura doesn't say that tearing toilet paper is a problem. He says that tearing a sheet of paper into many pieces is a problem, because then both sides you're going to be able to use. But just tearing the toilet paper and leaving a roll on the other side, that wouldn't be a daraisa according to the Mishnah Berura, because you're not fixing up both sides. And that's how he explains it. I think that's very difficult, especially in view of the fact that we saw that someone who tears something in his anger in order to appease his wrath, that's also called a tikkun. And the Mishnah Berura has trouble with it. And as Avi will tell us after Shabbos, he says an answer which is I think is very weak, but he says an answer, well, because it's appeasing your anger. So so the whole thing you want both sides. You want the tearing up. The whole thing is appeasing your anger. I find that very difficult. I find the Shulchan Oruch Harav much more persuasive here. And even though the Mishnah Berura has a Yerushalmi, I think we can say quite elegantly that we don't paskin like the Yerushalmi. And therefore, and therefore we have this Beiur Halachah, which is important. The Beiur Halachah says that even tearing a piece of paper is korea. But we have the Shulchan Oruch Harav who says that it's not. And only separating out stitches is called korea. And another reason why I think the Shulchan Oruch Harav is right is because korea in the Mishnah is presented as the opposite of tofer, the opposite of sewing. And therefore it stands to reason that korea is undoing a stitch, undoing stitches, or undoing papers that are stuck together, because gluing something together is the same as stitching two things together. And that's why it stands to reason that, like the Shulchan Oruch Harav says, that korea is only true when you're separating things that have been stuck together. If you're tearing one piece of paper, and you tear it up, that's not called korea. But again, the Mishnah Berura doesn't rule this way. But nonetheless, my strong inclination is towards the Shulchan Oruch Harav, both because of the Shulchan Aruch and because of the Svara, because it seems to make a lot of sense. But we're not going to have a lot of time here, so I want to get to some practical ramifications of all of this stuff. First of all, we've already seen in the Shulchan Aruch, not this one, the next one, in Yud Daled, we've seen in the Shulchan Aruch the question of separating papers that are stuck together. And then the question would be, what's the halacha concerning opening a letter on Shabbos? You have a letter, you want to open up the letter, you have an envelope, and you want to open the envelope on Shabbat, on Shabbos. Is it permitted to open the envelope or not? What do you think? David Price is not happy. No opening envelope, says David Price.
Well, according to Shulchan Oruch Harav, it's a problem presumably because it was glued together.
You're going to be ripping it, right?
Correct, meaning according to the Shulchan Oruch Harav, meaning even according to the Shulchan Oruch Harav, opening an envelope should be a problem because you're opening something that was stuck together. However, Avi, if we're going with the Shulchan Oruch Harav, then instead of opening it on the flap that's stuck together, you can rip it up.
Oh, yes, correct. Yeah, fine. Yeah.
And that, according to the Shulchan Oruch Harav, that would be okay. So
To talk to me or ask me a question, long press the action button, then let go and start talking.
A.
What was that?
What wasn't me?
I think we've got women who've joined the share after all that. Sorry, I can avoid that.
Avi, I see you couldn't resist that, Avi.
Yeah,
Nazi.
It's just an option. It's obviously Patua. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Avi, you won't stop, Avi. You won't stop.
Once I start ripping into it.
I see this is a side of your personality we're not often exposed to. So look, what about envelopes?
We know it's always there.
So first of all, let's see.
On the Mishnah Berura, I don't understand how his idea. If you have, what's he mean by if you have both sides are? I don't really understand. What do you mean he has both sides are somehow? I don't know.
I'll tell you. It means that you're tearing up a paper. Let's say you tear up the paper and you want to use both sides of it. Like you have this long paper, you have this long roll. You know, in America, they have toilet paper that's not perforated. It's just one long strip of toilet paper. And then you want to tear it up into pieces, but you want to use all the pieces, okay? And then because you want to use both sides of it, then you want both sides of the tear. You want to tear it up and then to use both sides.
And
if you want to use.
So then, and the second side you're using, that's going to be immediately or later on, or does that not make a difference?
It doesn't make a difference as long as you want them both, and there's a tikkun in both sides. There's some constructive use for both sides. That's good enough.
So then, the basis of the letter is it a constructive use because you've now got access to the letter? Would that be enough for the Mishnah Berura?
Oh, well, that is an excellent question. And so the Mishnah Berura, there are actually two types of envelopes that the Mishnah Berura and poskim speak about. What we're used to is a separate envelope. The envelope is separate from the letter. But there's another type of tearing which is inherent within the letter itself. Yeah. The letter is folded up in such a way that it becomes its own envelope. I'm sure you've seen these things here and there, you know, like a folded together with some wax or something like that, that the wax keeps it together, and then you have to undo the wax in order to open up the letter. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So these are two things, and here look at the Mishnah Berura here. Like the chayav, this is in the case of the papers that are stuck together. Toleris Korea v'chayav. Says the Mishnah Berura. Right, if it's weak, like by means of wax and so on, then he says you're allowed to open it. So that's not properly stuck together. That's not firm. That's not stuck together in a strong way. That's from the Magen Avraham he brings. And then he says as following. He says, well, this is about pages of books. What happens when you have pages of books that were not stuck, that were not separated properly, and now you want to separate them? He says, well, that's a problem. He says it's a problem of Korea. He says it's also a potential problem of Makabah Patish. If you can't read it, and by opening the pages up you'll be able to read it, then that's a problem of Makabah Patish. Then the Beiur Halachah, he says, like one of you mentioned before, that yes, the tikkun of being able to read the letter, that's called a tikkun. Opening the envelope, tearing the envelope, according to the Mishnah Berura, is a problem of Korea because it's a tikkun, because it enables you to read the letter. And therefore, like David Price said before, the Mishnah Berura holds that you're not allowed to open envelopes on Shabbos. Let me just find the place here. It's so long. One second. All right, hold on. Just trying to remember catchwords that I can look up. Well, it's somewhere here. Hold on. Give me half a sec. Let me find it. Here. Maybe it was a Mishnah Berura in Sifyut Gimel. Where did he speak about letters?
Letters. Avi wants to know about nappies.
I'm going to speak about nappies in just a minute.
Very fitting for Avi.
Nappies is very important.
Opening cans of dog food as well on Shabbos, things like that.
Cans of dog food?
Touche.
Yeah.
Come on.
Nice to me.
Cans of dog food.
Or even ripping the dog apart on Shabbos, David, in fits of anger because it's eating a Friday night meal.
Here you go. Guys, here we are. Right, this is about a letter. All right, Ptichas Igeres. He brings the Pri Chodosh. He says that a Yisrael that opens a letter, he has a Chiyuv Chatos, meaning it's a real Shabbos Chiyuv, right? Because it's Makalkan Amanas Letaken, Tikkun Mashiach Liftocha. So you want to open the letter, and that's called a Tikkun, right? So he brings a Pri Chodosh that says that this is a full Malacha. The Mishnah Berura himself says, well, it depends. And again, I'll leave this for your Shabbos reading. He says, if you're opening the letter itself, and this is a tikkun in the letter because you're going to be able to read it, then that's really also, that's a problem. However, if you're opening the envelope, then you want to shred the envelope. You're not interested in the envelope itself. So he said, that's a kilkul in the envelope. You want it for something else? Well, he says, even though we find that if you're doing it to calm your nerves, that's called a tikkun. He's not convinced that in this case it's called a tikkun. Very interesting. And he says that under such circumstances, you can't do it by yourself, but you can ask a goy to do it. Let me just see the end of this. He says, according to some, it's pure asa, and even with a goy, you should be careful. However, he says, if you have a great urgent need to open this letter, okay? So again, the Mishnah Berura is going with his own opinion that any type of tearing, even if it's not separating two papers, is pure Korea, and therefore your envelope, there's no way of opening it without getting into real trouble. However, others are much more makel on this. For example, the Chazon Ish said, well, if it's an envelope, the Chazon Ish basically says it's mutter. Very interesting. Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa is not matter. Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa says you mustn't open an envelope on Shabbos. However, the Chazon Ish says no. If the envelope is separate from the letter, then the Chazon Ish, if I remember correctly, says that there's no issue involved. He considers it to be similar to a case of Or al Gabi Chaves. There's a famous Tosefta that speaks about leather, which is on top of a barrel. And you need to tear the leather in order to get to the barrel. And that's mutter. And the Rashba asks, I'm not going to show it inside now because we don't have time. The Rashba asks, why is it mutter? Surely it should be at least the Rabbanon. It's a makalkel. Again, the Rashba is speaking about the slightly different case of breaking the lid of the barrel. But he asks, why should it be mutter? Surely it should be midrabanan also. And he says, no, if it's for a Shabbos need, if it's l'tzorech Shabbos, then it's mutter if you're doing it by way of kilkel. If it's a destructive manner and it's something that you need for Shabbos, then it's mutter. And that's the blanket heter that we have for opening all of these wrappers and stuff like that. Meaning, even if you're going to be machmir for the Mishnah Berura, that you're not separating things. By the way, in these bags of crisps, you are separating two things that are stuck together if you open the top of the bag of crisps. However, poskim there say that it's a very weak connection. It's very easy to separate, and therefore it's not called a proper korea. We'll speak about this in a minute when we talk about nappies. But in addition to that, it's mechanical. You're destroying it, right? It's a destructive act. And because we have this Rashba that doing a destructive act when it's Tzorech Shabbos, when you need to get to your food, or for some other Shabbos purpose, then it's mutter. And says the Chazon Ish, the same will be true of a letter. If you need to read it on Shabbos, you want to read it on Shabbos, then this is like tearing the leather on top of a barrel, which is mutter for Shabbos purposes. Let's speak about nappies a minute, because we don't want to cause any disappointment. The nappies are very interesting. Why they're so interesting? Because there's a couple of factors, a couple of things involved. First of all, when you want to open the nappy itself, right, to use it for the first time, you only use nappies once nowadays, but you want to use it, okay? So you take it out of the package, and then you've got the sticker, right? Now the sticker is closed together, right? It's stuck together. And in order to use the nappy, you've first got to unstick it, right? You've got to open the sticker, and then you're able to use it. And the question is, I think David is coming, and the question is that called korea, right? By undoing that sticker, you seem to be separating something which is stuck together, and some are machmir for this. For example, the Minchas Yitzchak and other poskim are machmir for this and say, well, because this was a permanent or potentially permanent stuck together, and now you're unsticking it in order to use it for Shabbos, so this would be a problem of korea. There are two reasons to be makel on this, and many are makel on this also. Yechav Das, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, and several others are makel on this also. Munachasava, and the reason why there's room to be makel on this is two reasons. Number one, because it was never meant to be permanent. When it was stuck together by the producer, he clearly stuck it together in order for somebody to buy it and to unstick it. Minchas Yitzchak doesn't like that. He says, well, it could be permanent. What if nobody bought it? It would stay together forever, and therefore that's considered permanent. Others say no, it's still considered temporary, and therefore it's not considered proper korea. The other reason is because it's also very easy. It's not really stuck together in a firm way. It's extremely easy to separate it out, and therefore that's not called korea. Korea is when you separate it, it's like tearing the stitches. It's something which is very strongly stuck together. And this is like the case of the Magen Avraham with the wax, which is easy to separate. But because of this, there are many people who before Shabbos, they take all of the nappies or diapers that they want to use for Shabbos, and before Shabbos, they open them and stick them together again. And why do they do this? Because the sticking together the second time is certainly very transient, very temporary. It's only for a few hours because soon you're going to be using them. And therefore, that's for sure mutter. But what they want to do is to make sure that it's not going to be still stuck together from the manufacturer. And that would be a problem of Korea. Some do this. In my humble opinion, it's mutter to open nappies on Shabbos, even if you haven't done this before Shabbos. But certainly it's a hider. If you want to stay clear of the Korea issue of opening it up, then you're okay. The other issue of nappies, of diapers, is closing them after you've changed the baby, meaning you've taken off a dirty, a soiled nappy, and now you want to throw it away. But before you want to throw it away, you want to close it. And how do you generally close it? You generally close it by sticking it back together again, right? You use the same sticker to stick the edges together, to wrap it up. And then once you've wrapped it up, you can throw it away and it's not going to soil anything, or it's not going to make a smell because you've stuck it together. And that is a potential problem of toifer, right? There's no Korea there, but that's a potential problem of toifer because that's potentially permanent. No one's ever going to open that up again. And you're sticking together two surfaces that are going to be that are never going to be separated, and therefore one should refrain from sticking together in such a way, certainly in a strong way on Shabbos because of a problem of toifer. But in terms of Korea, that's the issue of diaper. I think